Hello, my name is Kevin Maher, and welcome to this week's featured film in our Beyond the Bay virtual film series. This week, in remembrance of those who defended and sacrificed for our country, we will be featuring The Longest Day. The Longest Day was released in 1962 by 20th Century Fox and depicts what scholars have called the most important 24 hours in the history of modern warfare, June 6, 1944, D-Day. The epic masterwork, often cited as one of the greatest war films ever made, was the result of the tireless and passionate work of producer Darryl F. Zanuck, himself a veteran of both World War I and World War II. Zanuck risked his 35-year Hollywood reputation and a good portion of his savings to bring The Longest Day to the screen, and did so in the face of personal and professional peril. That The Longest Day exists in the form it does, and is such a solid representation of the actual events of D-Day, is a testament to his desire to reflect the glory, the confusion, and the sacrifice of the many men who planned and participated in the monumental invasion that altered the course of history. The Longest Day is based on the groundbreaking book of the same name, written by war correspondent and author Cornelius Ryan. The book was a bestseller in 1959, in part because Ryan was the first post-World War II writer to present a multi-sided retelling of the events, using extensive remembrances from soldiers, sailors, and airmen who participated in the invasion. Ryan spent nearly 10 years writing the book, which also gave him the perspective to not paint the Germans as mere war criminals, but as opposing combatants. He holds sole credit for writing the screenplay as well. Zanuck optioned the book from a French producer and presented Ryan with a completed treatment that was to be Ryan's guide for crafting the screenplay. Ryan and Zanuck had an adversarial relationship based on Ryan's belief in depicting the events as they actually occurred, and Zanuck's need to make the movie as cinematic as possible. There were 12 drafts of the script written, with Zanuck insisting on internationally famous authors like James Jones, who'd written From Here to Eternity, playwright Noel Coward, and Erich Maria Remarque, who wrote All Quiet on the Western Front, all weighing in. Ultimately, the majority of the script was Ryan's work alone. Producer Darryl Zanuck was a boy wonder when he rose through the writers' ranks at Warner Brothers and was named head of production at the age of 29, after having written more than 100 films, including the Rin Tin Tin series. He helped shape the Warner studio style of ripped from the headlines gritty urban dramas like Public Enemy, starring James Cagney, Night Nurse, starring Barbara Stanwyck and Clark Gable, and I Am a Fugitive from a Chain Gang with Paul Muni, along with the musicals of Busby Berkeley like 42nd Street and Gold Diggers of 1933. Zanuck left the studio in 1933 to start 20th Century Films, an independent company that turned out 17 highly profitable films in less than 3 years, before merging with Fox Films to form 20th Century Fox. He was named head of production and maintained the position for 20 years, churning out some of the greatest films of the 1940s. In 1956, however, Zanuck had left 20th Century Fox to form his own production company based in Paris. After a string of mediocre flops, Zanuck hit rock bottom, turning to booze after being evicted from his Parisian hotel. His ex-girlfriend was threatening a tell-all memoir, and many believed he was finished as a Hollywood player. When he came across Ryan's best-selling book in October of 1960, however, something changed, and he suddenly had a purpose, something to stake his comeback on. Meanwhile, 20th Century Fox had also hit rock bottom. By 1961, the studio had produced only one quality film the entire year, The Hustler with Paul Newman, a film studio executives had very little to do with. After Zanuck's hand-picked successor had died less than 2 years into the job, a string of production heads tried to fill in, all of them failing spectacularly. By 1962, when the studio greenlit the $4 million production of Cleopatra starring Elizabeth Taylor, they had no idea what was in store for them. And when the film ran into production difficulties, ballooning the budget to $40 million, the studio had no choice but to sell off a good portion of its backlot real estate to stay afloat. Things were so dire at the studio that the board of directors threatened to cancel the production of The Longest Day and take a $3 million write-off instead of risking the epic budget. Zanuck stopped pre-production in Europe and flew to New York to confront the board, winning a 6-5 vote swayed in part by board member General James Van Fleet, and he was able to continue production. The board insisted that Zanuck spend no more than $8 million producing the film. $1 more, he was told, and they would take away his cameras. To contain costs, Zanuck made the bold decision to have 4 separate crews shooting simultaneously, one each for the German, American, French, and British portions of the film. Zanuck traveled between locations, some as far as 200 miles apart, by helicopter. To cast the film, Zanuck had 4 secretaries working 24 hours a day, scouring star actor availability to plug in major stars into the 42 major speaking roles. It was his hope that by having name actors, it would make the story less confusing and also help at the box office. Actors like John Wayne, Robert Mitchum, Henry Fonda, and Robert Ryan all came in for short periods of time, shot their scenes, and then left, often never meeting any of their co-stars. Zanuck also negotiated with the 4 governments involved in an effort to secure actual equipment, uniforms, and soldiers using his vast network of allies built up over his 40-year career. In total, Zanuck used 23,000 soldiers from the US, Britain, and France. Shooting in black and white was also a strategic decision born of his budget, but it worked well to reflect the documentary-style visuals that audiences were used to seeing and also allowed him to use archival footage. When the film went over budget by $2 million, Zanuck personally financed production, keeping his overrun from the Fox board so he could continue filming. Even though Zanuck employed a separate director for each production unit, he still estimated that he shot almost 60% of the finished film. Andrew Marton, who shot the American portion, noted that he always had Zanuck looking over his shoulder, and Ken Anakin, who shot the British portion, admitted that on certain interior scenes, Anakin would set up the shot so that Zanuck could come in, look through the lens, call action, and cut. In all, 31 locations would be used, and shooting would take almost 8 months. With skeptical pundits referring to Zanuck as Supreme Commander, in mocking deference to Dwight Eisenhower, and calling the film Z-Day. More than 60 hours of exposed film was shot to make the nearly 3-hour epic film. When production was finished, a rough cut was created and sent to Fox headquarters in New York for review. While production was in progress, however, things had become even more dire at Fox, and the board now wanted to dump The Longest Day in as many theaters as possible and as soon as possible in order to get badly needed cash flowing into corporate coffers. Again, Zanuck flew to New York to confront the board, this time railing against them for nearly 4 hours, and finally calling a vote to reinstall himself as the head of the company. By an 8-3 vote this time, he again prevailed, became the chairman of the board, and installed his son, producer Richard Zanuck, as the head of production, a partnership that would last almost 10 years and restore Fox to its place near the top of the Hollywood studios. With his reserved seat, roadshow rollout release of his epic masterwork secured, Zanuck planned premieres in Paris, London, New York, and Los Angeles. In Paris alone, more than 1 million French citizens and 1,000 French soldiers turned out to line the streets for the premiere. Edith Piaf sang from the Eiffel Tower and helped turn the event into a national holiday. The Longest Day grossed more than $39 million in its first year of release, making it the #1 movie for 1962, and it stood as the highest-grossing black and white film of all time for nearly 30 years. The film was nominated for 5 Academy Awards, winning 2 for Best Black and White Cinematography and for Special Effects. While no film could ever document the sheer enormity of an event like the D-Day invasion, Darryl Zanuck's The Longest Day stands as a fairly accurate and condensed version of the most pivotal 24 hours in our nation's history. That he was able to pull this off while being undercut by his own studio, working on a shoestring budget, and managing the largest army in Europe at the time is simply amazing. The sacrifice of the hundreds of thousands of men dropped from thousands of planes or transported by some 5,000 ships is too much to contemplate, but The Longest Day remains a lasting testament to their heroism. Thank you for watching, and I hope you enjoy the film. Please come join us for our live Q&A on Thursday, May 28th at 7:30 Eastern. If you'd like to send us a question, please email us at beyond@baycommunitytheater.org. For more information, please go to our website at thebaytheater.com.